The next stage in our database development is to test the table structure and validation. So we've to test the structure and the validation of the relational database using suitable test data. That's normal, erroneous and extreme as appropriate. And I'll go through what those mean when we look at a test log. Testing of the queries and report is not required. And then we're given a list of things that we need to test. A record will not save without the surname being present. That's the presence check. A record will not save if the postcode is not in the correct format. That's a format check. A record will not save if the event number selected is invalid, and that's a table lookup foreign key. A record will not be saved if the cost per guest is below an accepted range. That's a range test. A record will not save if the cost per guest is above the accepted range. Again, that's a range test. And then a record will not be saved if the dietary requirements is invalid. And that's a table lookup value list. Let's just take a look at the test log before we actually start testing. This is a test log that will be given to you, and it tells us at the top here we've got to identify the type of test as N normal, R erroneous and X extreme. Just a little explanation of what these are. Extreme X is data that is outside of some range limits. So you use X when you're testing a range. N obviously is normal data that will be accepted by the computer, and R stands for erroneous. Now, anything that's not extreme and not normal will be erroneous if we expect the computer to validate it and to find it to be invalid. We need to ensure we've got screen print evidence that's included for all tests, and that any screen prints are readable and are referenced to the tests. Now, if the actual results column's not wide enough to clearly show the results, you can include any images underneath the table, but can you please make sure they are clearly referenced to each test. And do not carry out any other testing that's not specified in the activity requirements. When you come to do an exam in this unit, you don't get any extra marks for any extra tests, so it's just a waste of time doing them. And often the examiner comments on that in the examiner report. When we're finished, we can delete any rows that are not required. Let's just have a look at the column headings. We've got test number. I actually leave that until I finish my testing before I fill that in, and you'll see why when I demonstrate doing the test log. The type of test we identify as N, R or X, and again when it comes to an exam you do get marks for identifying the correct type of test. Then we've got the test data. We're going to write in here the data that we're actually going to enter into the computer, and then we've got expected results, and here we're going to state exactly what we think the computer will do with that test data. Then we're going to add the screen prints to evidence those tests. Let's just scroll along a minute. And we need to make sure that they show the test data that we've said we're going to use in all your images. Now, this final column in the test log is only to be completed if the results are not as expected. I've got an example in the one I'm going to show you, just to give you an idea of maybe what you should be including in this column. If, for example, all your tests work as expected, you don't have to enter anything in this column. If your tests don't work as expected, we need to explain what's happened, explain the error, and if we can correct the error, explain how we've done it and include any prints. So let's start making the entries in the test log then. So the first test we need to do is to demonstrate that a record will not save without the surname being present. In the test data column, I've written down for every field in the record that we're testing what the data is going to be. So for example, we're testing this customer's surname is going to be blank. I've said that's going to be blank. For the customer ID, because it's auto number, it's quite acceptable to put auto number. And then the house number, the postcode, and the customer phone number. We then write in the expected results column what we expect the computer to do with that data. In this case, the record will not save. The customer surname is blank, and an error message will be displayed saying the customer surname must be entered. So what we do next is we go off to Access, we key these details into that customer record and take an image. And here we have the image showing the data. Auto number is customer ID 4 next. I've left the customer name blank. Number 3 for the house number. Postcode HF9 9TT, and then the telephone number. And it's showing the error message there. Surname must be present and the record's not saved. The next test is a record will not save if the postcode is not in the correct format. So here we have the entry in the test log. In the test data, I've said what the customer ID is going to be, the customer surname, Chowdhury, the house number 3, and then the postcode's got the T missing off the end, and then the phone number. We write in the expected results column exactly what we expect the computer to do, and in this case the record will not save, the postcode's not in the correct format, and an error message will be displayed saying the value's not appropriate for the input mask. So we need to go and key those details into our customer record, and you can see it all matches the data in the image, what I've said I'm using, and here's the error message displayed. The next test will make sure a record will not save if the event number selected is invalid. And this is a table lookup for and key. We're going to be using TBL event guest for this. So here we have the test log, and in the test data we're going to enter event ID 6. That doesn't exist in the event table, so it should come up with an error. Guest ID 2, dietary requirement equals vegan. In the expected results column, we're going to say that a record will not save. Event ID does not exist in TBL event, and the error message will be displayed because the related record is required in TBL event. We go off to Access and we key that test data into our database, into TBL event guest. So there we've got event ID 6, guest ID 2, dietary requirement vegan, and it's come up with the error you cannot add or change a record because a related record is required in TBL event. The next test will be to make sure a record will not be saved if the cost per guest is below the accepted range. Here we have the test log. We're going to use event ID 5, event date 4/7/22, event type training. The guest cost is £9.99, that's below £10, so it should come up with an error, and the max number of guests is 5. In the expected results column, the entry will be record will not save, guest cost is less than £10, error message displayed, guest cost must be between £10 and £50. So we'll go off to Access, key in this test data, and then take an image. And here's the image, event ID 5, 4/7/22, training, £9.99 and 5, and we've got the error message showing the guest cost must be between £10 and £50. The next test in the log demonstrates that a record will not save if the cost per guest is above the accepted range. Here we have the entry in the test log in the test data column. We're going to use event ID 5 again, event 4/7/22, event type training. The guest cost this time is going to be £50 and a penny, which is obviously over £50, and the max number of guests is 5. Again, we write in the expected results column what we expect the computer to do with that test data. We're going to see the record will not save. So we've got that in twice. Let's just take one of those out. The guest cost is above £50 and the error message is displayed. Guest cost must be between £10 and £50. We go to Access, key this test data into our database and then take an image. And here we have an image, event ID 54722, training, £50 and a penny, 5 max, no guest, and the error message displayed, the guest cost must be between £10 and £50. The final test is a record will not be saved if the dietary requirements is invalid, and this is a table lookup value list. In the test log then, we're going to use event ID 5, guest ID 2, and the dietary requirement is going to be veg. And in the expected results column, we say that the record will not save, the dietary requirement is not from the list, and an error message will be displayed, the item is not on the list. And here's the image, event ID 5, guest ID 2, and we put veg, and there's the error message, the text that's been entered is not on the list. Now, when I did this test, it actually allowed me to add veg to the list, and this is a good example to show you how to use the final column in this test plan. Just let me scroll along. So in this final column, that's better, I've said the user was allowed to add veg to the list, and we've got an image here showing that veg has been added to the list. And to solve that in the property sheet, I changed allow value edits to no. And if we look down here, allow value edits no. And that meant the person couldn't add veg to the list. So that's a good example of using this final column. I've now completed all the tests. I'm just going to finish off now by numbering the tests and also identifying the test type. All I've got to do now is number the tests from 1 to 6. So it's literally just a case of going through and putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this first column, the test number. The other thing I need to do is the type of test. So the first test, the data is erroneous. The second test, the data is erroneous. The third test is also erroneous. And the fourth test is X, that's extreme, because we're testing the extreme limits of a range. And 5 is X also for the same reason. We're testing the extreme limit of a range. And then test number 6 is erroneous. We now have our test log completed. In the next video, we'll cover evaluating the table structure and the validation.